Hi, everybody. My name's Renza Scibilia. I'm from Diabetes Australia, and welcome to this week's Facebook Q&A all about diabetes technology, and I am joined by David Burren. But before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands where we are. I am coming to you from beautiful Wurundjeri land. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Today, we are talking all about diabetes technology. Thanks to Abbott Diabetes Australia, who are sponsoring this event. We're talking about the latest and greatest in diabetes technology that is here, that is coming, that's been here for a little bit. And there is nobody better to do that than our very, very own Bionic Wookie, David Burren. David, hello and welcome.
Hi, thanks, Renza.
Tell us who you are. I mean, anybody who knows diabetes tech, I'm not even going to just say in Australia, I'm going to say diabetes tech around the world will know who you are. But for people who don't know, share with us who you are.
I live in Melbourne. I've had type 1 diabetes since 1982. I've worked in all sorts of areas. I have been blogging at Bionic Wookie since 2017.
Yep.
And I have a technical engineering background, so I like to understand what's going on inside all of these bits of technology that I have to use and the other ones that I don't get to use.
Fantastic. So we will share the Bionic Wookie website so people can go and have a look. It really is a wonderful one-stop shop for what is here and what's coming and the ins and outs of diabetes technology. It's a really great place to see what is current. There's a terrific pump update and CGM update and blood glucose meter update.
No, there's a CGM update being prepared at the moment.
Oh, it's being prepared, but you can have a look at it and you'll see the last one. So David's great at keeping us up to date with what's going on, but the pump one is super. So please, as always with these events, they work super well when people ask questions. David will answer all of them. I've got a heap, but I know that there are people watching who probably have more. We will note that you have blue in your hair, David, and I'm going to tell everybody, even though this is a lie, that it is for Diabetes Awareness Month, which is being celebrated around the world. That's really, I think, a US thing, but everybody has jumped on the bandwagon. This month, of course, we've got World Diabetes Day. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I do appreciate your blue hair. I've got blue nails. It's tragic, and I'll apologize for that. But okay, let's talk about technology. I'm going to start by saying, how many devices have you got strapped to your body right this minute, David?
3.
What have you got?
One pump.
Can you show us? Because I've got one and an insulin pump. So
I've got a pump there. There's an Omnipod. And I've got a CGM sensor on my bum, so I'm not going to show you that one.
Thank you.
And I've got another one on the back of my arm there.
So you've got 2 CGMs.
Yeah, I'm comparing the output of them at the moment.
And so when I ask how many devices David has, and 3 is actually quite disappointing because sometimes he has many, many more than that because he is doing all sorts of interesting whiz-bang sort of things to try and work out what's going on with all of these technologies. But let's start. Let's break things down a little bit and talk technology in terms of what's newish. And when I say newish, I know that we've had some things that have sort of been launched in the last, I don't know, year, 2 years. So that's sort of the time frame that we're talking here. So let's start by talking about things that monitor our glucose levels, if we can start with that. So I saw that you had on, is that a Dexcom G6 that you're wearing under your arm there?
Yeah, there's a G6. I've also been using G5 and Libre and a bunch of others as well. Used some Medtronic in the past, but not for a while.
Fantastic. So let's talk about the Dexcom G6 that was launched, and let's talk about how that's different from the last one, which was the G5, which has been around for a very, very long time now. But what was new with the G6?
The G6, internally, the guts of it work very similarly. Calculations it does. It has some more logic in there, so it gets away with not needing a calibration every day. Okay,
so we're going to go back and explain what that means to people. I should just add to people, frequently when I'm having these conversations with David, I say, speak to me like I'm a 6-year-old, because he often speaks at a very, very high level. We need to remember that not everybody, I've even just thrown in CGM and we don't necessarily know what that is. So can you explain firstly what CGM is, and then let's talk a little bit more about the new.
Okay, well, hopefully we're all used to pricking our finger, getting a drop of blood out and measuring the glucose in it with a meter. So a continuous glucose monitor, most of the ones, all the ones we have in Australia at the moment have a tiny little filament that goes underneath the skin doesn't go all the way down to the blood, but it measures the glucose level in the body cells. And that's very similar to the level of glucose in the blood. And it lags behind a little bit, but it's fairly similar. So it measures usually every 5 minutes, and then we can get that reading off without having to prick our finger each time. Not only can we conveniently see what the reading is, but we can also see the change. So we can see if we're going up or down, which you don't get with a finger prick.
Yep. Yep.
So the Dexcom G5 that we had.
That's what I'm wearing at the moment.
Yep. So there are two components there. One is the sensor that goes on your skin, and the other one is the transmitter that clips in. And you're supposed to replace this sensor every 7 days on that. And every day you need to do a finger prick, tell the system what your blood glucose actually is, so it can work out this conversion and make sure that it's going to give you the right sort of numbers. The transmitter on that is supposed to last about 3 months. The G6, they changed a bunch of things. It's much lower profile. It has an inserter that's much easier to use, so you can do it in some more hard to reach places without a two-handed operation that you need with the G5. It's lower profile, so it's flatter and less likely to be knocked, but also it's smarter. It doesn't need a finger prick. It works it all out by itself, and it just gives you numbers.
Yep. Now, when you say a lower profile, you mean it sits flatter against the skin?
It's flatter, yes.
Yep. So you won't walk into door frames and things like that quite so easily.
Well, when you wear sensors, Libre sensors are quite flat as well. When you wear them on the outside of your arm, right where you've got yours,
I know.
I find when you're walking through doorways as normally, your brain automatically knows where the edge of your body is. If you have something that extends it by about 3 mil, you're very likely to knock it off. It's like a cat and their whiskers. They know how wide they are to go through things. We subconsciously know where the edges of our bodies are, and it takes a little while to get used to.
Yeah, so, that's true. But I'm pretty good now because I always wear it there, and I'm
going to walk
used to it then. Now. So yeah. All right, good. So that is continuous glucose monitoring there, and people get their readings to their phone or to a reader or to their pump.
Yes, sometimes you have to scan it with the phone. On the ones like the Dexcom with Bluetooth, it can go automatically to your phone or to your pump every 5 minutes and give you alarms when things go out of range.
Okay, so that's continuous glucose monitoring, and we'll come back because we're going to talk about what Medtronic have got as well. But in the meantime, can we talk about the Libre flash meter? How's the sensor? How's that different? Does it do the same thing? What are we talking about there?
It's got a nicely integrated inserter. It lasts. Back a step. I said the G5 lasts for 7 days. The G6 is also supposed to last for 10 days.
10 days.
The Libre lasts for 14 days. It's got a simpler insertion, and it is similar in that it's measuring the same thing under the skin. It's doing it every minute, and if you scan it, because you have to read the value off, it then gives you a number, and that number can in fact change every minute, but you tend not to do it every minute, so that detail doesn't matter. The Libre 2, which was a recent update, they added the facility so that it will link to your phone via Bluetooth. Not every model phone, there is a list of compatible ones. And it'll do what the Libre 1 doesn't do, in that if you're going high or low, it will alarm on your phone and say you need to scan to get the number. So it's not quite the same operationally. It doesn't give you all of the data without doing the physical scan as the Dexcom does. But in the internal functioning of it is measuring the same sort of things. The Libre also doesn't support calibrations. It's coming up with a number of how accurate, a number of what your blood glucose probably is. Some people find it more or less accurate than the Dexcom. I find it's generally trustworthy in a normal range. But if you're low or if you're high, it tends to exaggerate those, which is really the safe thing for it to do. You don't want it to underestimate the fact that you're low.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's and you're not wearing one, so we can't show you, but there are pictures all over the place. So it is about the size of a 20-cent coin, even probably a tiny little bit smaller. And people wear it on their upper arm or on the inside of their arm. There you go. Look at that.
Yep.
It is super small, actually. I know that when I first tried a Libre, and Libre's now been out in Australia for what, 5-6 years, I guess now.
2016 it came out.
Yeah. Okay. I remember wearing it and just being shocked, because I have always worn, well, for a very long time, I've worn CGM, and just how small and flat it seemed. So it is, if you're looking for something that, and you feel that this might be a bit too chunky, then that's certainly an option. Now, I will add and say, we very, very much know that these devices are expensive. They are subsidized on the NDSS, but not for everybody. About 50% of people with type 1 diabetes in Australia have access to the NDSS subsidy. That doesn't mean that all 50% obviously have taken that up, but they do have access. Diabetes Australia absolutely isn't done with our advocacy. We are continuing to look at ways to broaden that access and to work to encourage and influence there being more people able to access subsidised CGM. I know they're expensive. I pay out of pocket. David, I know you pay out of pocket as well. And it is an expensive device to drive. So we know that there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who are unable to do that. But I did just want to add that, yes, we know that, and we are continuing to work to improve that access for more people. So let's just go back quickly. I just wanted to ask you something about the Libre 2, which came out, was it last year? Time means nothing. Earlier this year, whenever it was.
Within the last year. So that.
Yeah. So the big difference there is this alert thing. So it will alert to your device to say, hey, you're out of range, but it will not give you the exact number until you physically scan. That's the deal, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And can you turn those alerts on and off? Because I know that actually for some people, the reason they love Libre is because it doesn't make that noise. So can you turn it off?
It's configurable in the app on the phone.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
I haven't used that particular app recently, but
yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's something, because I know that one of the things that people often say is that with the CGMs, there are certain alarms. While most of them are configurable, there are some that you can't turn off, such as the urgent, low, and some people don't want alarms. Perfectly normal. You do you, however your diabetes works. So you can still have those turned off if you're not interested. Now, while we're talking about continuous glucose monitoring, there's also Medtronic as well in Australia. Tell us what there is from that particular brand.
Okay, Medtronic have a similar setup with a sensor that goes in and then a transmitter that clips into it. Their transmitters tend to be rechargeable.
Yep.
You need to recharge it every sensor cycle. They've had the same form factor. They all look the same for quite some time.
Yeah.
Just some different writing on the top. So they had some with the 640G pump. Most of them talk directly to their pump. So they have ones that talk directly to the 670G pump and let it do the closed loop stuff we can talk about later. And then the 770. And with the 780 pump, I think there's an update coming for their CGM, and they've got a new one in the works. It's all very similar stuff. Most of them talk directly to the pump. Yep. They do have a Guardian Connect system, which talks via Bluetooth to your phone. Again, very limited number of phones and doesn't talk to watches or other stuff. That one they market to people who are on MDI, because anyone who's not on MDI is supposed to be using a Medtronic pump and therefore using their Medtronic pump CGM. That's the way their world works. Yep.
MDI, of course, is multiple daily injections. So, yeah.
Just jabs.
Jabs. Yes, that's right. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. So let me ask, I'll answer this one. Somebody said that my daughter has been using G5 and uses injection. She's not on a pump. How can you change to G6? At this stage, she can't. So at the moment, the NDSS criteria for using G6 is that you need to be using a tandem insulin pump because they're interoperable. So there is a review being undertaken at the moment by the Department of Health, and that is currently underway. But at the moment, that is the requirement for using G6 on the NDSS. But it's sort of one of those watch this space. As we learn more, we will certainly share what any updates around that are. And somebody's also asked about the Senseonics Eversense 180-day implantable continuous glucose monitor. They said it's a total game changer. It's approved in Europe, also in the US. It's awaiting approval for the FDA. I think it is actually being used in the FDA. Oh, the FDA have got a 90-day approval. And they're looking at it eventually being a 360-day implantable sensor. I know a number of people who have tried this. I know some people who absolutely love it. I know some people who are a little bit, not really sure about it. But again, that's the same with everything. Tell us what you know about it.
I've written some articles, so if you just search for Eversense on bionicwookie.com, you'll find a few. So they had the 90-day version.
Yes.
And they've extended that. There's a 180-day version. They're doing research into the other ones. And with the 90-day version, you had to calibrate it every 12 hours.
Yeah, that's right.
I think on the current one, you only have to calibrate it every day.
Yeah.
And they're planning to do much longer stuff with the longer ones as well. But you do run into a few operational issues. People think, oh, it's an implanted sensor, I won't have anything on me. That's not quite true.
Not true at all, is it?
It's implanted under the skin. And this is the thing, like a very large grain of rice. A surgical procedure, a doctor cuts a hole in you and puts it in and stitches you up again. And then you have a transmitter that's sitting on the top and it's stuck to your skin surface.
Yes.
Via gel adhesives, silicone gel adhesives, which don't leave a mark. They come on and off quite easily. But if that transmitter is not there, it's not working.
That's right. Yep.
That transmitter you can't swim with. You need to take it off for swimming and for showers and that sort of stuff.
Yep. Yep.
So you do still have something attached to you. It's not completely hands-free. And when you get to the end of that period and you need a new one inserted because the old one's going to expire, people often end up with a gap of suddenly they have no CGM access.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially in the US healthcare system where they run into things that they need to find a doctor and then get that approved through healthcare, and there's a 3-month delay while they actually get a doctor who's approved to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's operational issues, logistical issues with actually keeping one of those systems up and running.
Yep.
I wouldn't be particularly keen on having a surgical, well, very small, but a surgical procedure done every 3 months, because I plan to live for a lot longer than just a couple of 3 months.
Yes.
And that's why they're moving to the longer things.
Yep.
But just having something stuck to me that I replace every couple of weeks is, for me, not a major hassle compared to having those surgical procedures.
Yeah.
And I can swim with mine.
That's right. So I have spoken with some people, and I've been really interested to see how the different generations have changed. The transmitter that sits on top is it has gotten smaller. So I think that I remember seeing someone wearing a first generation one, and it seemed quite big, but it would almost seem like about that size, like sort of an iPod.
It wasn't quite that big.
It seemed that big. It was huge. Anyway, they're way smaller now. So they are getting smaller, flatter profile. One of the other problems though with them, they don't like heat. They don't like the sun, which I remember hearing about. And I was somewhere I was at a diabetes conference in Europe when they were talking about that, and they didn't seem fussed by that. And I think I may have been in Stockholm or something. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work too well in an Australian summer. So that's something interesting.
The way it works is they have some materials that fluoresce under glucose in there. And it's a reversible reaction. It doesn't get used up like the way a glucose CGM filament sensor does. They have a little light sensor there that measures the light coming off these things.
Oh, right.
Okay. And when you get the infrared light from the sun shining through your skin, and it actually goes in a long way, it stuffs that up, and the system says, too much ambient light, I can't give you a reading. And you think, but I've got a shirt on. Yeah. What's going on?
It's just the sun, and the sun in Australia is very bright. I
don't know how reliable that sort of system would be in Australia and the Middle East and places like that.
But I will say that we're not being negative about it. As I said, I've spoken to some people who have been using it for a long time now. They were in trials and they absolutely love it. They really do find that convenience of not needing to change something every week or every 10 days. They love that. And they don't find that the insertion is anyway problematic. It's not painful. It's, you know, they just need to go to the surgery to have it done. It's all very quick. So it's certainly something that, you know, some people are going to love. And as ever, your diabetes may vary, and what is great for one person may not be great for someone else. What else is there in the way of continuous glucose monitoring type devices that we don't have here that maybe might be coming? I know that Libre 3 is launched in very tiny markets in Europe. And when I say tiny, it is small, but also, oh my goodness, what a tiny little device it is. It's about the size of, is it a 5 cent, 10 cent coin?
Not a 5.
Yeah.
It is quite small.
Yeah.
It is a change from the Libre 2 in that Libre 2, you still have to scan it like a Libre 1.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That will Bluetooth the alarm signals.
Yes.
With the Libre 3, you scan it with the NFC to initialize it, but then from then on, everything is via Bluetooth directly to your phone.
Yeah, okay. Right.
The Dexcom system will talk to a bunch of devices, including tandem pumps and other things. Yeah. The Libre 3 system will only talk to their app, and I'm not aware of anything coming out of it talking to other devices as well. So it's, again, like the Medtronic stuff, a very closed ecosystem. It only talks to their app, but it's small and convenient, and I gather it's accurate enough that it's got some certification as an iCGM for use in closed loop systems, but none of that's actually happened yet. But
what is an iCGM? What does the I stand for?
I stands for integrated. So it's we have these complex systems. We mentioned closed loop systems, and that's where an insulin pump might decide to give you more or less insulin based on your glucose level and the food you're having, and automatically make that adjustment, and you end up with this closed loop. If it's not closed, we have the automatic thing, the open thing. We look at the CGM and we decide we are eating this food. We tell the pump, like we manually tell the pump we need to give it this insulin. So we are completing the loop. The closed loop is that becomes all automatic, and the iCGM stuff is certified to be reliable enough to be used in systems like that.
Yeah. So yes, there have been announcements that Libre is going to work with a variety of different pumps. So again, one of the things that's so amazing about the diabetes technology world, I think, is that there are things happening all the time. So that is super interesting.
There are things happening all the time. It does take a while for someone to get to Australia, and we do get a lot of people saying, oh, it's going to be 2045 till things arrive, whatever. Libre 2 came out in Europe about 2 years before it got here.
Yeah.
It does mean that by the time it got here, lots of people had worked out all the kinks.
Yeah, there's your silver lining. Yes. But I will also say that there are some places, sometimes we are actually the launch market. So there have been Medtronic devices that have come here first. I know that, and this is, you know, an older system, but the Animas Vibe, rest in peace, Animas, and the Dexcom G6 was here long before it was in the US. I remember
the G4, not the G6.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry, not the G6, the G4 and 5, or G4, I think it was at the time. But I do remember being in the US, and people, they had access to the devices independently, but not as an integrated system, and they were really very excited about that. So I know that sometimes it does feel like we are at the end of the chain, but we're not. The
other CGM that I'm sure someone's going to be asking about in the background is the Dexcom G7, which is the next one.
Let's talk about that.
And the G7 is not a product yet. It's not actually a thing. Well, it sort of is. It's had all sorts of trials. They've published results, and they've said, we're hoping to release it in the US later this year.
There's not much of this year left, so yeah.
Sorry, I just had someone knocking on my door. I missed that.
I just said there's not much of this year left.
Yes, there is not much of this year left. It's smaller than the G6. It's a single integrated thing like the Libre, in that you attach it and it's done.
Yeah.
That does mean that it's harder to cheat and extend them and use them for longer than we do, which We tend to with some of the other ones because they cost a lot and we're not funded by the government.
Yeah, that's right.
We tend to work out, oh, if I just run it for a few days longer, it's giving me accurate results now. Officially, the manufacturers can't tell us to do that sort of stuff.
And we're not
And
telling
when it comes
you to do that either.
No, but
Yeah.
I mean, I do that stuff because it's cheaper for me. But when it comes to something like the G7, that option goes out the window because it's all one integrated unit, and when it stops working,
that's it.
Well, we'll see what happens, but for now,
I mean, that's like the Libre now. Nobody has been able to extend a Libre, have they?
Yeah. The Libre 1, it is possible to extend for 28 days. Libre 2, no, it's not possible to extend.
Yeah, there you go. All right, good. So we've talked about continuous and flash glucose monitoring, and we've talked about the Sensionics in there as well. Let's talk about insulin delivery for a minute. So we're going to talk pumps, but then we're going to talk smart pens a little bit as well. So let's talk about pumps because we've had, I mean, it seems like a while since we've had, what was the last new pump to have been launched here?
The last new pump would be the Omnipod Dash, which was launched just a couple of months ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned the insulin pump choices article on the Bionic Wookie website. So I update that every couple of months whenever there's a change as to what's available.
Yep.
So I put that there as a resource so you can actually see what's around and what your choices are.
Really good. Yeah.
So we've had, I think the YpsoPump came here in 2018. We've had the Accucheck Solo since then. The Medtronic 670G and the Tandem also came in 2018.
Yeah.
And then Medtronic have had various updates along the way of the 770 earlier this year.
This is actually kind of exciting because it wasn't that long ago when Animas pulled out of the market and we really didn't have much happening here in Australia. There was really very, very little choice. So there is certainly more available. I will just mention, so Omnipod is the first real patch, well, no, not true actually, because the Solo's here as well, but it's a patch pump. So that's what David's wearing on his arm. Can you lift your arm up again? So there's no tube, which is what
there's just 200 units of insulin in there.
Yeah, so I've got a tubed pump. So there's a cannula that's sort of in my belly, but this sticks directly onto the skin without the tubing, which I guess means that you don't get caught in doorways.
It also meant that I didn't have to take it off when I had my shower this morning.
Yeah, yeah. So how are you finding it? Well, I mean, we really haven't had a patch pump culture in Australia, which is interesting because I know that in the US they are hugely, hugely popular. Are you seeing why people would like it?
It's convenient in some ways. It's different and awkward in a few other ways, depending on what you're used to. We do have to say it's not funded by health insurance here yet. It's not on the prosthesis list. So the only way you can get them is by spending $40 every 3 days on a pod.
Yep.
Because that pump on the back of my arm lasts for 3 days and then it gets thrown out.
And there is no way to extend it at all. Yeah.
No.
Yep.
It actually lasts for 80 hours, so 3 days and 8 hours.
Yeah.
It gives you an alarm at 3 days and says it's time to change, but you have a grace period.
Yep.
And whatever insulin you've put in the pump, you can't then, put a new cannula on and keep going anymore. No, that's all used up and any leftovers wasted. So you need to try and estimate how much you're going to be using in that time and put it all in before you start, because you can't top it up halfway through.
What's the maximum amount that it can take?
200 units.
Okay. All right. So for people who are on really high quantities of insulin, it won't last the whole 80 hours or the 3 days, will it?
No, no, and it becomes even more expensive. And the smallest you can put in is 85 units.
Right. Okay. All right.
So some kids on really tiny doses might have trouble with that. They might be wasting a lot of insulin left over at the end.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
On the traditional pumps that we used to, we have the pump, then we have the tubing that goes to the site that's on you. And sometimes you put in a site and it's a bad site and you need to put it in somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
With this one, if the site is bad, you've got to rip it off, throw it away and put a new pump on.
Right. Okay.
It's an all or nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of those things. I mean, I'm loving seeing people in Australia. So I will suggest if people want to have a look at Jenna at Type 1 Vibes on Instagram. She's been documenting her trial with it. And it's really interesting because Jenna hasn't used a pump before. So this is her first pump experience, and she's doing a really great job of talking it up and talking it down. Like, just really like, this is the stuff I love. This is the stuff I don't. She took a bit of a break because she just felt that she didn't want to be attached to something, which is a really big consideration if you haven't used a pump before, even if you have. Actually, some people do like to take pump breaks, but but Jenna's a really good person to go and have a look at. So it's Type 1 Vibes, and the one is spelt W-O-1 as in the number one, but W-N-E, not as in the number one. Yeah.
That's actually a relevant point of being able to switch around with other pumps. So it's very expensive. If I was going to use a Omnipod full time, that would be a lot of money. Yes. I have a normal pump. Yes. But I've had the freedom to get a box of these. So I got a box of 10. Yep. And I'm still experimenting with one every now and then, but the plan is, especially when it comes into summer, I'll have the option of changing pump and spending the next 3 days sailing, swimming in the water, out of the water, and not have to worry about things being waterproof. Yeah, yeah. And then I can go back to my other pump. Yeah, fantastic. Yep, good. So of course, with all of these things, neither David nor I are healthcare professionals, so please don't take our advice on any of this. We're not here to provide you with advice. We're just here to talk about what the options are. So have a chat with your healthcare professional, have a look online, have a look at David's blog though to see what all the choices are, and then have those discussions and try and work out exactly what's right for you. All right, so Omnipod is new and it's here, so just really clearly again, it is not subsidized. So, but they do have a subscription program. So if you have a look on the Omnipod Australia website, you will see what that subscription program is, which brings down the cost of it for people who are keen to use it long term or ongoing on an ongoing basis. Let's talk about what Medtronic pumps are here, because I know that there are a few. So what are the choices for people? Okay, so they all look the same at the moment. They do all look the same. They are exactly the same design. It's just one of the buttons on the front will have a different symbol on it. Yep. Okay. So there's the 670G that was around, and it used the same radio stuff that the old 640G used, but that you can't really buy one of those now. If you're going to buy a pump, you would be buying a 770G. Okay. Yep. Which does the same sort of stuff. It has the same logic and algorithms in it, but it talks via Bluetooth. So it will talk to your phone. You have an app on your phone where you can see the current settings on the pump. That gets uploaded to the Medtronic cloud automatically, so that your family, if you want to give them access, they can follow it. You can share that stuff with your doctor without having to upload reports before you go and see them. And all the CGM data is all integrated in there, because the pump is the thing doing the CGM as well. They have a new pump which is now approved for Australia called the 780G. Yes. Which is a software upgrade, and the closed loop logic inside it is apparently a lot smarter and better. Okay. And the 770G pump, which is the only one you can buy right now, is supposed to be upgradable via software to be a 780. Yep. It is complicated in terms of we don't exactly know how that's going to work. We're getting conflicting reports from different parts of Medtronic. Some of them, especially some of the sales reps, are saying the upgrade to the 780G will be free. Right. Other ones are saying there's a charge of $500. And if your upgraded pump then fails, you will get it replaced with what you originally had, a 770, and have to go through the upgrade again. So we're not quite sure how all of this is going to work out. Watch this space. Yep. Yep. Okay. I'm going to keep saying that, I think, because there is so much that we don't know about. So in the olden days, when we had pumps and we had CGMs, and that's all we needed to think about. But you've just touched on something that I want to talk about, which is software updates. So let's talk about the Tandem T-Slim pump for a little minute. I don't know if I was going to say, have you got one there, but you probably don't. But no, I don't have one here. No, have a look online, people, if you want to see it. I remember when the T-Slim pump was first launched overseas, this was really different. It was super, super different to what we'd seen in pumps before. It was really sexy. It looked like it was a touch screen, and we hadn't seen that before. And I know that we've got other options with that. It was way smaller than what else is available. It had this bright coloured screen.
And now it is here in Australia. It's been here for about 3 years, I think, when it was launched. But it's not. But the thing about this pump was that you could upgrade, you could update it with software, and that was something that was pretty amazing. So now we've got this extra thing though that we need to think about. So it's not a matter of you get a pump, you've got it for 4 years, you don't need to do anything or think about it other than what you're doing with your daily running of it. But that's not what it's about now. Now we're talking about software updates. Can you talk to me about that in terms of the T-Slim?
Yeah, so the software updates on that are rolled out in that basically you go through a certification training course. I think it's online, gets signed off by your doctor, it all gets approved, then you get the magic secret one-off code for you, and then you can plug your pump into your computer and update it at home.
Yes.
So they've had some bug fix software. There was one change that came out last year, I think. That was a thing to do with the CGM or the battery processing.
Yeah.
But that's basically been the same functionality. They brought out some new functionality which was called Basal IQ, and that's one where if your CGM data says you're going low, or going low within half an hour, it will stop the delivery of insulin from the pump and hopefully avoid you going low. And when you come back up again, it'll turn it back on.
Yep.
And that's available in Australia now.
Yes.
It's not perfect. If you've got, say, an extended bolus because you're coping with a long meal going on, and it decides to suspend and then resume, it won't resume that because it doesn't know all the smarts of we've got this much food going on. It's not tracking anything other than, is your glucose saying you're going to go low or not? Do I stop or start? So you have to sort of still stay on top of it every now and then and tweak and change things. They have a new update called Control IQ.
Yes.
And that is a closed loop system where it slows down the insulin as you're starting to go down. It stops it if it's going to go too low, and then increases the insulin when you go too high. So it's trying to keep you in this band. And that's what the Medtronic systems like the 770 are doing as well. It's been available in Europe, in the US for about 2 years.
Yeah, ages. Yeah.
They had to update it to get it into other countries because we use different glucose units, all sorts of other things. And it needed to be approved for here. But then there was whole other dramas with the reliability of the pumps, and the pump got suspended. Its approval got suspended by the TGA. Well, that was being worked out. And at the moment, the pump is available here, but in its current basal IQ status, and that is undergoing review for 6 to 12 months before they'll bring out the next thing. So I don't think we're likely to get access to this Control IQ until early next year. Yeah,
it's really frustrating because I know there were lots of announcements that had been approved, but we haven't got it. Yeah.
With all of these updates, you need to have a pump that's in warranty.
Yes.
So if someone bought a pump 3 years ago, and they had the thought, oh, there'll be this update coming along. Actual fact, people who got pumps 3 years ago, those were replacements for the Animas pumps. And then their warranty only lasted till the end of the Animas warranty, and then they had to get new pumps.
Yep.
So when those pumps go out of warranty, you can't update them anymore. They stay at their old status. So it can still be in your cupboard as a backup pump. But if that backup pump won't talk to your current CGM, unless it takes the same consumables, it's of limited value. It's really nice if you've got an old pump because you've replaced it. That old pump is a very convenient backup for on holidays.
Yeah, that's right.
We have warranty for when a pump dies and the manufacturer will send you out a new one, but that doesn't happen the same day. So sometimes there's a holiday or a long weekend or you're traveling, and it's always good to have a backup if you've got that. So it would be nice to have them the same.
Yeah.
It's a complicated world. The updates are only available if you're in warranty, and the updates are only available when they're approved and when they're actually released in the country by the manufacturer, and everything has to stack up together.
Of course. Now, you're wearing a logo on your t-shirt that's YpsoPump. So talk to us about the YpsoPump. But that's another gorgeous pump. I mean, I know, like, I get really excited when things look lovely, and this is a lovely little pump. I don't mean that sounds really patronizing. What a lovely little pump, but it's beautiful. It's really tiny, and it's a touch.
It is. It's a little black thing.
Yeah.
And it has a funky little touch screen.
Yeah.
Yep. So this has been out for a few years.
Yep.
It's in its current version. It has an app on the phone, and the app can read the current status of the pump. But you tell the app, I'm having this food, doing these things, and it says, oh, you need to give 2.3 units or whatever. Unfortunately, you then need to manually go to the pump and scroll up 2.3 units and tell administer.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect integration, but they have an update. They have a couple of updates that are being rolled out overseas, and they're due to be here real soon. One of them is integration with the Dexcom G6.
Yes.
So it knows what the numbers are.
Yep.
And the next update, which they were talking about being at the end of this year, we'll see when it actually gets here. They're trying to do a rollout all around the world at the same time. That's one where from the app on your phone, you'll just be able to press a button and it will bolus to the pump in your pocket. So I've been lucky enough to use some early versions of that in some clinical trials, because I do some work supporting some clinical trials here, and it's very nice. I'm looking forward to the real thing getting here. Yeah.
Any idea when that might be? How long is a piece of string?
Yeah, their CEO earlier this year in a video interview said they were trying to get it out as a Christmas present for the world.
I mean, it's a pretty small market, but hey.
Well, yeah.
All right.
Oh, he was talking about worldwide deployment. Yep.
What have I forgotten in terms of insulin pumps?
Well, there's the Solo, which is a little patch pump that is funded, and that has a plate that goes on you with the cannula.
Yep.
And the pump has a reservoir that you recharge. So that one, you don't replace the whole pump every 3 days.
Right. Yeah.
You've got cannulas, and you've got reservoirs, and you've got the actual pump. So that's more similar to the funding model that works for everything else. So that's funded by health insurance.
Yep. And the NHS for the consumables. So yep.
There was the AccuCheck Combo, which was another very nice little pump, but it just ceased sales a month or so ago.
Oh, I'm really sad about that, because I think it was such a great option.
It had been around for quite a few years, and they're obviously moving on. The Solo is from the same people, so they still have a pump in the market. It's not
so that's Roche, for anybody who wants to get
Roche
online and have a look. Yep. All right. So that's what is going on in pumps. But as we said, David's Bionic Wookie website has an updated.
I've got a list there of all the pumps I'm aware of overseas that aren't here yet, and maybe aren't likely to be here, or maybe will be. So I'm trying to make it a fairly complete overview. Yep.
Good. Now, we haven't touched on blood glucose monitoring, and we're not going to have time to do that today. But again, there is lots, and David updates when there's something new. So do have a look at that. And I just want to say, blood glucose monitoring isn't old hat. It's not old technology. The majority of people who monitor their glucose levels around the world are using a blood glucose monitor. So I think that's probably something that we need to make sure that we're not talking about it because it's irrelevant. It's just that we're going to move on and talk about some other things now. But do have a look. Also, we will share a link to the Diabetes Australia self-monitoring glucose position statement, which doesn't need updating because it's not completely updated with all the latest and greatest that's here, but it's a good place to start. Blood glucose monitoring is absolutely relevant. It is something that, as I said, most people are doing. So do not think of it as old technology. Hey, let's talk about.
And in fact, I just did a fingerprint.
What have you got? You just did a fingerprint check. Yes. And wearing a G5 means that I'm meant to do that twice a day.
Well, I just looked over at the screen over there, and it's about the same value as my CGM, so I'm all good.
Good, excellent. Just for fun, what was that little meter that you just had?
That meter there is an AccuCheck guide.
Yes.
So it's one that the values automatically go to my phone. I don't have to write them down; they just end up in a log.
Yep. Okay. Good. All right. Excellent. Now let's talk about smart pens. And connected pens. Just as I said that most people use blood glucose monitoring around the world to monitor their glucose levels, most people use a pen to deliver their insulin. So we've spoken heaps about pumps, but it's absolutely not that everybody has them. They're certainly not funded for people with type 2 diabetes. So let's talk a little bit about what we know when it comes to the smart pen. What is a smart pen? What am I talking about?
Well, we'll go back a little bit. We have insulin. Some people still use insulin syringes.
Yes, they do.
That's what I started out on. Some people prefer them for some reasons over pens.
Yeah.
But the pens, basically, you put a needle on the end, you dial up the dose, and you inject. And hopefully you've got a different pen for each type of insulin that you're using, and you don't get confused.
Yep.
And some of the smarter pens will keep a record of what the last dose was and how long ago it was.
Which is really useful, because how else are you going to remember? Like, that's one of the best things about using a pump is being told when you last bolused or gave yourself some insulin.
So the Nova Pen Echo is an example of that. That suits the Novo insulins. So they've gone a step further in that some of the pens will now be able to send that number and the dose back to a phone or a computer. There is one that I saw in Europe where you can actually calculate on the phone the dose, and it sends the dose information to the pen, and then it administers it, and it can do less than 0.5 unit precision. Which I always wonder how useful that is anyway, because when I pull the needle out, there's a little drop on the end, and how much of a unit was that? Did it all go in? So there's a pen called the InPen from Companion. That was a US company that put this together, and it's Bluetooth linked. So it records all the information into an app on your phone. It's keeping track of when you had your last injection of various things. Companion got bought by Medtronic. Medtronic earlier this year got the InPen approved on the TGA's list of approved devices. So it seems likely that they might bring that to market at some point. We will see what it costs, because I think those pens lasted, they were covered by insurance in the US. The whole pricing model works differently, but then they get replaced every now and then. It's not you just get a manual pen and it lasts forever sort of thing.
Good.
There are some other pens from Novo and from Lilly who have some functions where it can send the dose over. Those things are coming, but no sign of those in Australia at the moment.
And there has been on and off, but Insulin was sort of like one of the first things that did this. That didn't have anything to do with a particular brand, but it sat on the top of the
Insulin, and you can still get them. There's timesulin.com.au. So it's a different cap for the pen. Always need to have a cap on the pen to shield the insulin from light, because otherwise it does go off just in light, even if it's in temperature. But these things have a timer on it. So the last time you had it off for a little while, you must have been doing an injection. Put it back on, and it starts counting again. They have models of those to suit different pens, because they're all slightly different shapes. So they have them for all the disposable pens. They don't have them for the fixed pens, the reusable ones. Good.
All right. Thank you. All right. So sorry, I'm just munching on a glucose tab because I am low. So even with all the technology that I use, that still happens occasionally. Okay. Now we have spoken about everything we've spoken about so far has been commercially available. It's gone through TGA approval. If it's available here in Australia, there is some funding for it, or not necessarily some funding for it, but it has been through regulatory processes. But that's not what everybody is using. Some people are using what we refer to as DIY systems or off-label systems. Tell us about what that is. And before you do that, though, I will say we will share in the comments the Diabetes Australia position statement on DIY, so people can have a read about what it is. It does actually need updating again, because these things do change, and it's hard to keep on top of everything. But what is this? And I ask this as a rhetorical question because I've been using a DIY system for the same amount of time that you have. What are we talking about?
DIY systems started off with people working out how to get the numbers from the Dexcom receiver. It used to be this little pocket unit. You had how to get those onto their phones and across the internet so that parents could watch the glucose values of their children. So remote monitoring was set up, but there was no functionality provided by the manufacturers to do that. But people worked out how to talk to these devices and get the numbers out. So there was a thing called Night Scout that got formed, which is a free, fairly accessible web service that people use to share all this data around. And then, funnily enough, a year or so later, Dexcom came out with Dexcom Share and Follow.
Yes.
And actually admitted at conferences that that wouldn't have happened if the DIY people hadn't shown the way.
Yeah, clever people.
So that was just the first example. So some of the things that happen now, we've worked out how to talk to some of the pumps and send them commands. We're getting the CGM data, and people have put together closed loop systems that automatically adjust the insulin flow based on the food you're having. And basically the sort of things that the Medtronic 770, 780 and Control IQ will do. I'm a little bit biased in that I've been using it for long enough that I believe there are technical advantages to it. So for me, it's superior, but there are a lot of knobs and dials to tweak, and for a lot of people, it's easier to use the commercial systems. But it's one of the other options out there. So there's a wide variety of pumps and CGMs that people can glue together using these systems. It's not like the Medtronic systems where their system needs the Medtronic CGM and the Tandem where it needs the Dexcom G6. When I started doing this, I was using Libre sensors hooked up into my system, so it automatically scanned it every 5 minutes. So the work that I've been doing, I mentioned clinical trials before. We've been running a clinical trial at the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute this year at assessing the safety of some of these systems. Because there's lots of data out there. There's thousands of people using these systems and saying, it's safe, it works. There's only been a couple of cases of people making mistakes. I think that was likely where they miscalibrated their CGM and then it said they were high, but in fact they were low. So the system wanted to give them more insulin. I think someone in the UK ended up in hospital. There were all sorts of investigations about that. And the CGM that they were using, everyone says now, you shouldn't be using that one because that's really dangerous. But there's so much anecdotal evidence out there of this stuff works, but very little clinical evidence. So that's some of the stuff we've been doing, trying to gather some of that evidence.
Wonderful.
New versions keep coming out of these things. A couple of times a year, there's software updates. I think it's going to be hard for the commercial systems to stay ahead of those in features, but their aim is to get something they can deploy to more than just thousands of people, and also have something that people don't need to learn quite so much about how to use.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, this is one of the things that I've been using Loop, which is one of the DIY systems, for 4 years. You and I think started within about a week of each other. You know, the thing that I find really interesting is those discussions around safety. So I guess there is this idea or this assumption that because there hasn't been the really robust regulatory process, so in the US that's the FDA, here it is the TGA, that therefore these systems aren't safe. But that is an assumption that I think is really unfounded and really unfair, because they're built on a foundation of safety.
They're built on a foundation of safety. The people who are building these systems are using them themselves. We're not going to do something dangerous because we don't want to die. That's right.
Yes, and parents are putting these on their kids, and you know, so I think that, you know, anything that we can do to highlight their safety. I know that the fabulous Dana Lewis has written extensively about that, and I would encourage people to have a look at her website and have a look at that. If you Google Dana Lewis and DIY APS, you will find lots of really great information. So another website that, you know, these user-led technologies, I think DIY gives people an idea that they're cobbled together and that they don't have any safety, and that's just really not the case. Somebody today actually commented that because I made the mistake when I first started talking about this to use the word hack. That scares people. I don't use that anymore. I use the term augment technologies. And somebody said, I haven't broken my pump or hacked my pump. I've made it better. And I think that that's a really good way to look at it as well.
Well, it is also worth pointing out that no one modifies their pumps to do
that's
this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We just work out how to talk to them. So the pumps that people use for these are still things that to supply them, sell them in Australia, they need to be TGA approved.
And they are.
It's just the software on the back end that's giving it instructions is the thing that's changing. And I mentioned the technology of these, in my opinion, is ahead of the commercial systems. And I am quite prepared to hold up myself as an example in that my time in range for 3.9 to 10 for the last year has been at least 95%. During that time, my HbA1c has bounced between 5.0 and 5.5%. And since January, I have not announced any carbohydrates to the system or manually balanced. Everything is on automatic.
Amazing.
I live my life now that I go to the kitchen, I eat some food. I have in the back of my mind, I'm not going to be eating too much food. That's sort of not an unreasonable amount. I do tell the system when I'm exercising, but it's a different mindset. I describe it to some people sometimes as a Pinocchio moment. There's somewhere along the way of, I'm not having to think about diabetes all the time. I'm a real boy. And a lot of people talk about the looping experience as something that it's all about quality of life and how much you're having to think about diabetes. And a lot less than we do when we manually have to keep adjusting things.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. My diabetes burden is far, far less. And also the other thing that I think about this is that the algorithm that drives everything is way smarter than me. It doesn't make human error.
And it doesn't get hypo brain either.
No, it doesn't get hypo brain, and it doesn't get burnout brain, and it doesn't get diabetes brain. You know, all of those things that are just a reality of living with diabetes for those of us who do that. David, we really haven't touched on pretty much, you know, we need to wrap it up because there's so much more that we would love to talk about. I do want to talk about a couple of things. I did mention that it is World Diabetes Day coming up on the 14th of November. And this year the focus of that is access. So access to treatment, to devices, to insulin, to all sorts of things. So do watch this space for what we're doing around that. But you will see already that people are talking a lot because it is Diabetes Awareness Month. So your diabetes feeds may already be absolutely washed with blue as people are talking about that. Or not talking about it, because some of us do feel a little bit burnt out sometimes when there's so much diabetes and diabetes awareness, and we sit there and go, we're already aware, we live with it. But do have a look at what's going on. The way that you celebrate this month and World Diabetes Day is very much an individual thing. It is the 100-year anniversary of the discovery of insulin, which, you know, we don't, it's really funny because people say, oh, it's 100 years, but it's not like a day that we talk about. It's actually like a 2.5-year thing that we will be talking about all these really important milestones about the discovery of insulin. So do have a look at what we're doing about that at Diabetes Australia. There's lots, we'll share some things in the comments about that. But thanks to everybody who's watching. I know that there was a really great discussion going on in the comment section. So thanks to everybody who's been doing that. Keep it going. You can share this because this will be available on our Facebook page forevermore. Share it with somebody who may not have seen it. David, thank you. As ever, you are an absolute wealth of knowledge, and I'm so grateful that you have shared what you know with us. Will you come back and do this again another time at some point, please? Yes.
Sure. I'm sure there will be new things to talk about too.
Always. Yeah. And please do go and have
you.
a look at the Bionic Wookie website. Thanks so much to everybody. But Liam, we can wrap up the broadcast now. See you later, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.